scientists are bitterly divided over new evidence for an event which occurred back in Roman times. In 312 AD, something happened which changed the history of the world. While the Roman Emperor Constantine prepared for a battle, he saw a light in the sky, which he interpreted as a sign from God. Many believe it persuaded him, and in turn the whole Roman Empire, to convert to Christianity.
Constantine's conversion to Christianity is, I think, one of the most important events in world history. If it can be linked to a particular event, that would be just magical.
But just what did Constantine see in the sky? The trail of evidence starts with an intriguing scientific discovery.
Okay, Angelo, what's that?
Which has led to heated argument between scientists.
That's not a crater at all.
Personal attacks has nothing to do in science.
It seems the crucial event that turned the Roman Empire toward Christianity may now be linked to the catastrophic impact of a meteorite. The key to the mystery lies about 60 miles east of Rome, in the heart of the Abruzzo Mountains, near the hill town of Cecchinaro. Cecchinaro is a quiet place, well off the tourist trail. But its history dates back thousands of years before Roman times, and it's an area steeped in ancient tradition and belief. A few years ago, Swedish geologist Jens Ormo was hiking in nearby mountains. He makes an astonishing discovery in an area called the Sorrente Plain.
I started to walk, I didn't see anything really because everything is just the green plains. Coming up closer and closer, still can't see anything really. And then suddenly you started to see the rim rising up in front of you. It's really a hill, you have to walk up on it. Wow!
The unusual circular lake with its raised rim sparks Ormo's curiosity. He immediately decides to investigate further.
I asked myself, what on earth I have formed this structure?
Ormo teams up with two other geologists, Angelo Rossi and Goro Komatsu. They come from the International Research School of Planetary Sciences in Pescara, 50 miles from Sorrente.
I think that, yeah.
The three return for a closer look at this strange structure.
What do you think, guys?
Wow, Jens.
Wow. We have to measure those things.
Yeah, it's pretty high, and actually it's very wide, Jens.
The raised rim is particularly intriguing, and they want to establish the precise dimensions.
Okay, that's good.
Okay. 78?
Yeah. The rim is unusual.
The thing that is impressing me is actually its regularity. It's not completely equal on the side, but there is a regularly changing shape.
It's a very interesting shape. I'm very intrigued by how it's rising and dropping.
Back at their lab, the three scientists review their findings using a three-dimensional model of the crater.
This is very interesting, this part.
They find that the shape and height of the rim in relation to the crater diameter suggests that the structure could well have been formed by a single violent event. It points to one thing. This is exactly what happens in a meteorite impact. And the shape of the crater even suggests the meteorite landed at an oblique angle.
It's interesting, the teardrop shape like this, indicating an angle, a rather low angle, lower than like 45 degrees.
Ormo believes he may have stumbled on Italy's first recorded meteorite crater. The sleepy town of Cecinaro may be home to one of the world's few known impact sites, but as yet Ormo has no proof.
There's only two things that you can use for proving an impact site: shock evidence and or meteoritic component.
So they return to the lake, looking for pieces of the meteorite. These often contain metal, and using a metal detector, Rossi looks for clues in the rim itself.
Probably this is some ancient picnic. Horseshoe.
With Rossi not having much luck, Ormo and Komatsu take samples of soil from the rim. Analysis in the laboratory might reveal telltale clues of the shock from an impact.
Now we can see if these mineral grains have been affected by something.
They wash the soil to remove mud and organic material. They're looking for fragments of the meteorite itself, and also for minerals like quartz. If there has been an impact, the quartz may show evidence of shock. Ormo and his team do find some shocked quartz, but not enough to prove an impact. However, they do unearth another exciting clue.
Then we also found small balls, small spherical objects, a couple of millimeters wide, and they are also just a crust, they are hollow inside.
Ormo suspects these crusts might have been formed in the searing heat of an impact. Similar material has been found at other known impact sites.
I was looking for the small grains that could show some shock evidence, but these were a bonus that I hadn't counted on.
By now, news of Ormo's work is spreading. In nearby Cecinaro, villagers are intrigued to hear that their crater could be the result of a meteorite impact. The mayor, Giuseppe Colantoni, is quick to see there's an opportunity for his village.
The discovery of a meteorite could be very important for us. At the moment, we're suffering economically, and this could mean a great increase in tourism.
At the crater, Ormo is still looking for the conclusive evidence he needs to prove his theory. He decides to establish exactly when the crater was formed. To do this, he must take samples from deep inside the rim itself. He gets permission to drill.
The only way of really showing what this thing is hanging on that drilling.
They drill into the rim, penetrating down to the original ground layer underneath, and they extract core samples. An analysis of the bottom layer, the ground level before the rim material was deposited on top, should reveal the age of the crater. The base layer is isolated from the cores and sent for radiocarbon dating. And the answer comes back. Allowing for a margin of error, it dates back to sometime during the 4th or 5th centuries. If there was an impact, it occurred when the Roman Empire was still at its peak. It must have been witnessed by local people. And at around that time, an event like this would have been hugely significant.
The 4th and 5th centuries were a period of great religious competition as Christians sought to turn pagans from the error of their ways to the truth of the Christian message. It was an age when any natural phenomena were interpreted as a sign of favor or displeasure of the gods.
Jens Ormo believes that there should be historical evidence for such an event if it happened.
If this is occurring at this time in central Italy, it must have been seen or witnessed or recorded somehow.
But Ormo is a geologist, and his main priority now is to find the scientific evidence that will prove the impact really happened. The team wonders if they might have missed some clues back at the crater itself. Looking at diagrams of known impact sites, they see the main crater is often accompanied by smaller craters.
I think we should see if we have anything like this surrounding the structure that we know of today.
they return to Sorrente, studying the ground more carefully.
Something like this size should have a field of smaller craters surrounding it. This structure being like droplet shaped, I would say. Hey Angelo, see something? Hey Angelo,
Yeah,
what's that?
They're big holes.
it's a hole.
Okay, wow, it's pretty big.
There's another one right behind.
Also here.
It's a wonderful feeling when you are in line with the theory. And that is a very, very nice feeling. We were very happy, really happy at that time. I'm coming. Let me take a GPS at the center.
Using GPS, they map out the positions of nearly 30 of these small craters, and they form a pattern very like the ones found at other impact sites. They're becoming steadily more confident that this is a meteorite crater.
A structure of this size should have a small field of craters around it, and we have a field of small depressions on one side here, so it's a good indication, but no proof.
Ormo believes that fragments of the meteorite itself should be buried under each small crater. Meteorites are often highly magnetic, so another scientist, Patrick McGuire, searches for magnetic anomalies, areas of raised magnetism.
There you go, right there. Wow, that suggested a 40 nanotesla difference in magnetic field.
They discover there are magnetic anomalies in each of the smaller craters.
We decided that we would like to see what is causing these anomalies. If it can be high magnetic objects in the ground, or if it is just the structure and the variations in the soil.
Ormo's team get permission to excavate 2 of the small craters in the hunt for magnetic debris. But although they dig down to a depth of 30 feet, they find the debris has formed tunnels which go even deeper, and they fail to find any fragments of the meteorite. But they do make another startling discovery. Pieces of burnt clay. Lumps of clay which have been baked into terracotta. Tests show that the clay has been exposed to temperatures of around 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, the sort of heat you would get from a brush fire. But Ormo is not convinced.
If it had been a brush fire, this burnt clay would occur all over the area that we excavated. And in no place in that area we could find any of this burnt clay, except for inside this structure and at several meters depth.
And further testing shows the clay was burnt at the same time as the rim was formed. It's yet more evidence for the meteorite.
This has been like a detective story where you are looking for clues and you find one after the other and you build a puzzle and the pieces fit together in that puzzle.
In the US, impact specialist Clark Chapman from the Southwest Research Institute in Colorado has closely followed Ormo's work. Intrigued by his findings, he visits the Sorrente Plain for a closer look.
The size of this crater is a little over 100 meters in diameter. I would guess that only a few craters this large have been made in the last 1,600 years. And that's not too many on the land surface of the Earth, and it's pretty remarkable to find it here in Italy.
Chapman believes that a crater of this size is likely to have been formed by a meteorite more than 30 feet across, and he has a theory about the teardrop shape of the crater.
It's common that meteorites break up before they hit. There's a cluster of craters called Henbury craters in Australia, and the largest crater there is thought to be 2 craters side by side, and that's a plausible explanation as well for why it would have this shape.
Impact scientists have studied what might cause a meteorite to fragment. The Natural History Museum in Vienna, Austria, houses the oldest and largest public display of meteorites in the world. The director, Christian Kerbel, is an impact expert.
Meteorites travel at a very high speed, maybe 10, 20, 30 kilometers per second. And as they traverse through the atmosphere, they experience a lot of friction and they can break up. and then hit the Earth as a cluster, and this could have happened at Zerente.
This seems the most likely version of what happened. The meteorite came in at a very steep angle, and before impact began to break up, with two big pieces producing the teardrop-shaped crater, and a shower of fragments producing a series of smaller craters.
In a few seconds, it would have been this enormous explosion. You'd feel the ground shake, you'd get a concussion of shockwave and winds, and you'd have mud or rocks falling down around you if you're within a few kilometers away. If you were right there, you're toast.
By now, the story comes to the attention of the press. One man who hears the news is a local historian, Roberto Santilli, and it immediately catches his attention.
I started thinking that it was quite strange that such an event were not recorded, and I remembered the local legend that might explain everything.
Santilli contacts Ormo to tell him about this story.
What you are interested in is a legend and describe a frightening event which occurred here in Cecinaro.
The legend has been told over many centuries by priests and village elders.
Era nel mese di agosto, quando la neve del Sirente si scioglieva lentamente.
The legend records how, on one occasion, when the area was still pagan, a local cult dedicated to the goddess Cecina was holding a rite in her honor.
Le labbra aperte, i loro movimenti sempre più eccitanti, l'aria dolce e le facce.
The cult was closely linked to Bacchus, the god of wine and fertility, and it's likely that such rites were wild and uninhibited affairs.
All'improvviso una nuova stella, mai vista prima, più vicina, appariva.
The legend tells how in the middle of these celebrations, there was suddenly a bright light in the sky.
Più grande del sole. Dopo un rumore tremendo colpiva la montagna, squarciando le grandi querce secolari.
There were loud rumbling noises, and the earth shook. The statue of the goddess fell to the ground, and the primitive temple was destroyed.
Un enorme silenzio. Sembrava che la montagna non era mai esistita. L'intera valle un sepolcro.
This story provides the historical evidence that Ormo and his colleagues have been looking for.
What really convinced me is how people describe the event. They use words like, this object in the sky is soon shining brighter than the sun. Also something shaking the ground. And that is exact the same words as has been used by eyewitnesses of recent fireball events.
And that's not the end of the story recorded in the legend. It also relates that the cult assumed the destruction was the work of the Christian god and immediately converted to Christianity. A church now stands on the exact site of the pagan temple to the goddess.
Okay, this is the fresco.
Inside is an image of the Virgin Mary as she appeared afterward to the converts in the ruined temple. But the church at Cecinaro, where the pagan temple used to stand, is nearly 5 miles from the crater. The explosion must have been massive. Christian Kerbel believes there could have been an enormous explosion in the air just before the meteorite hit the ground.
There would have been this gigantic fireball with huge tornado force winds. It would have probably been killing people and animals because of the explosion force. There would have been a killing radius of something like 10 or 20 kilometers around this area here.
And then it would strike here, and it would be like a small atomic bomb. An air blast that would wipe out anything on the ground for a couple of 100 meters in each direction.
It all ties together. All the evidence now points to one astonishing event. Sometime around 400 AD, a meteorite struck in this area of the Abruzzo Mountains. There was an enormous explosion, probably in the air, as bright as a second sun. Temperatures on the ground below the impact would have reached thousands of degrees Fahrenheit. Fires would have raged over many miles, and over the mountains at Cecinaro, they would have seen the flash and felt the ground shake. And a pagan cult converted to Christianity.
The idea is quite plausible. We have many similar stories of miracles happening, leading to the conversion of large groups of pagans to Christianity.
And since that time, the Christian tradition in Cecinaro has remained strong. This is their annual procession in honor of one of their favorite saints, Antonio. It's an extraordinary story, and it soon becomes even more astonishing. The event is soon being linked to the conversion of Constantine himself and the conversion of the whole Roman Empire. Some 60 miles from Cecinaro, just outside Rome, Constantine and his army are planning the battle of their lives. They're about to take on a huge force who heavily outnumber them. But as they prepare for battle, something remarkable catches their attention.
I think there can be little doubt that Constantine saw something in the sky. It may have been a cross. It may have been a cross with the upper part turned into a loop. As a result of this vision, Constantine became convinced that the God of the Christians was going to support him in battle. He encouraged his soldiers to paint the Chi Rho symbol of the Christian God on their shields, which was the first two letters of the name of Christ in the Greek alphabet, in the hope that that will grant him victory.
Against the odds, Constantine and his army win a great battle at Milvian Bridge. The victory will change the course of history.
That's the clincher for Constantine. The fact that he wins that battle against the odds convinces him that the Christian God has power. He effectively begins the widespread conversion to the Christian faith, and that has influenced the population of the world down to this day.
Ormo's discovery at Sorrente is now making news all around the world. But another geologist has doubts about the whole story. Fabio Speranza works for Italy's foremost geological institution, the National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology. He grew up in the Abruzzo and still has a house here. He knows the countryside and the Sorrente crater well.
To be honest, I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. To me, it was a nonsense. It was absolutely impossible that it could be a meteorite.
Speranza, together with Leonardo Sagnotti, a colleague from his Rome headquarters, traveled to the Abruzzo to carry out their own investigation.
I am passionate about geology, and so I felt a personal duty. I don't know how to say. I had to do that.
As he and Sagnotti travel around the Abruzzo, they establish there are many other ponds. Speranza believes they are all similar to the Sorrente crater.
There are many similarities. Diameter, rim, we measured it and the diameter is 100 meters. So Sirente is 140 meters, is absolutely comparable.
And it's not just the shape and size that are similar. Speranza and his colleagues take soil samples from around a number of these ponds. When they analyze these samples, they all appear much the same. There's no evidence of any contamination at Sirente to suggest something special happened there.
There is no difference between Sirente and the other lakes of Abruzzo.
Speranza thinks the whole meteorite theory comes from other scientists' unfamiliarity with the region.
I was sure that if these people had known well this landscape, wouldn't have told this story.
All these ponds are used to water livestock, in particular sheep. Millions of them have been grazing in these mountains since well before Roman times.
Here you had the ideal situation for sheep, very good grazing land, but you had a big problem. You didn't have water.
The absence of surface water in the region is because the Abruzzo mountains are limestone. Except in a few isolated places, water disappears into underground caverns and streams. Speranza claims it's well known that shepherds dug these ponds, Sirente and the others, by hand to provide watering holes for their sheep. They dug them at points where the soil allowed water to be retained, and he dismisses suggestions that the ponds are too big to be man-made.
To say that it's impossible that a man could have created this in Roman times is simply ridiculous to me, if I can say. Because Romans have created Pantheon, Colosseum, incredible bridges, aqueducts, and these are quite easy to dig. This is just soft soil, not very difficult.
Speranza believes the position of the pond at Sirente, just like all the other ponds, has been carefully chosen. These pictures taken at Sirente when the valley floods and water collects around the crater show the soil at this particular point of the valley is able to retain water.
I don't think that a meteorite, by chance, would have landed in the exact part of the plain more favorable to retain water and to form a lake. And for this reason, I think that this has been created by man.
Speranza is convinced that the so-called crater is man-made. There's no need to invoke anything so exotic as a meteorite. But the local mayor is unconvinced. He's already planning a celebration in honor of the pagan goddess at the center of the legend, and doesn't agree with this latest theory.
I don't believe in Speranza's theory. I think what formed the lake was an extraordinary event, like an object coming from outside.
Hoping to disprove Jens Ormo's theory that the Sirente crater was formed by a meteorite, Speranza brings in a team from his Rome headquarters to do their own scientific investigation.
The Italian geologists who have studied the area were a little bit offended about this theory, because we are not in the middle of Africa in an area which was not explored by anyone. Many geologists have studied the landscape. They didn't attribute it to a meteoritic origin.
So his group are doing their own survey of the area. They're using an instrument which measures the electrical resistance of the ground to build up an image of the layers underneath, down to a depth of 300 feet. They start by looking at some of the small craters around the lake, building up a cross-section of the different layers.
Of soil above.
Looking at the results back in the lab, Speranza can see a layer of limestone shown in red. In places, the limestone layer has been eroded by water to form cavities deep underground. And they observe that the small craters on the surface are aligned over these holes in the limestone.
Well, that's fantastic. There is a big hole in the limestones just below the small craters.
Speranza concludes the craters are simply natural depressions caused by eroding limestone.